Hey guys, it's Siobhan with 2KD and Beyond. Welcome to this week's episode of Starseed Origins. Today we're going to be talking about the Blueprinter Soul Group. Now, just a few quick words before we jump into what the Blueprinter Soul Group is and the different kinds of blueprinters. So all of the information presented in this video is based on the soul realignment modality created by Andrea Hess. Soul realignment uses the Akashic records to read into soul type, soul expression, soul group of origin, and past and present life karmic patterns within the soul blueprint. The information I'll be talking about today is from my studies within the soul realignment modality and from my own personal experience working with Blueprinter Starseed clients. So if you'd like to learn more about soul realignment Akashic record reading, you can find the links in the description box and or pinned in the comment section below. So what or who are the Blueprinters? They are a soul group that is very different than some of the ones that we've talked about in previous episodes of this series, and that's because they aren't really from anywhere. If they do have a galaxy or planet of origination, it isn't necessarily known. So they're essentially infinite travelers, and the mission of their soul group is to explore the far reaches of space and time, creating realms, matrices, and biological systems which souls can incarnate and inhabit. So they are the creators of the human reality as we know it, in respect to the biological system we live within and the way that consciousness expresses itself through our bodies. Blueprinters are like soul level engineers who work specifically with the soul blueprint, hence the name Blueprinters, and are concerned with the advancement of civilization because they helped to create it. So they will often incarnate into humanity to assist in clearing karma and or expanding human consciousness. Blueprinters love to experiment. Part of this soul group is all about science and logic and rationality and creation and engineering. And blueprinters love to experiment with biological systems. So in this case, they've experimented not only with the biological system, but also with the consciousness and the soul blueprint, another aspect of what they do as a soul group. So they've been actually doing this for millennia in different star systems and dimensions. Humanity is just one of those experimental creations. And just like with any experiment, there can often be an untheorized or unexpected result. And this was kind of the case for humanity. So the merging between the mental body and the physical body, where consciousness interacts with physical expression, produced some of these unexpected results that the Blueprinters hadn't necessarily planned for. And the result was emotions. Not just emotions in and of themselves, because those do exist within other beings, and they've existed for time infinite. But it's the way that we feel emotions that is different. For humans, feeling is such a subjective, personal thing, and it's also connected to the physical body. So the way that we interact with consciousness in the human body is different. We feel our emotions so deeply that it can override our rational mind and influence our consciousness and, more importantly, our unconscious experience. So as a result of this, the collective consciousness of humanity tends to function primarily on these emotional experiences. And they tend to be a real core motivator for our choices and our actions and what we do physically. So because of this unexpected emotional embodiment, the Blueprinters, which are by nature a highly rational and intellectual race of beings, they tend to struggle with understanding these emotional body expressions, especially while they're within the human experience. But we'll talk more about that in a bit as we get into the different types of Blueprinters. So that's another aspect of this soul group. Just like it's not the same as other soul groups because it doesn't have a place of origin, it's also different because there are subsets within the Blueprinter soul group. So there's different roles and different soul expressions within this overall umbrella term of Blueprinters. So let's talk about those. First, we need to talk about the originators because they are the originators. They created the soul blueprints. They work with them. They oversaw the development of the human experience. So they are very high functioning beings. They actually tend to be quite rare. And I've never worked with any in my practice doing soul realignment or Reiki or counseling of any kind. So I've never actually worked with them one-on-one. So this information is just from, the soul realignment modality and Andrea's work with these souls. But they tend to present themselves very rarely within this type of work because they're so focused on what they're creating rather than what personal development they could do or anything like that. So they tend to be very prominent, very affluent, and they help to advance humanity through their resources. So they might incarnate into lives where they are very rich, wealthy, successful, influential, leadership roles or positions, or where they can help to influence and increase the consciousness of humanity in some way through those resources that they do have, a platform or something like that. So they are visionaries. They are the vision creators. They help to shift the consciousness of humanity through their vision and the portrayal of that. Now, just like in previous episodes, every soul group, in fact, every energy in and of itself, has both a positive and a negative polarity. It doesn't mean good or bad. It's just two opposite sides of the spectrum of energy. On one side, you have the functional expressions, and on the other side, you have the dysfunctional expressions. The dysfunctional expression of the Blueprint Originator soul group subset is disillusionment. So they can become really bored or frustrated with the human experience, especially if they find that what they're trying to share via their resources or via their consciousness isn't being well received, or if they feel like they're not being successful. Those two are kind of tied together. So for them, the highest embodiment is really standing in that creative expression of their vision and being a leader that can help to advance humanity in any way that they see fit. Now, next up, we're going to talk about blueprint designers. So designers are very creative, very artistic souls. They're like the graphic artists of, a movie. They're the ones who create and draw, and they express their vision in an artistic way. They tend to, or at least they can be, very eccentric, very artistic, and not well understood by the general population or the collective of humanity. They're very adept, though, at expressing through their art. And that's one of the main kind of goals for the designers, is to express consciousness through art. So this can be seen in terms of light imprinted art coding. So I've talked about this in a previous video. If I can find the link, I will leave it here. But that's something that can happen as well. And specifically for blueprinters, they can encode light frequencies into their art. And by looking at their art, even if you don't consciously understand it, the soul blueprint can integrate some of those light codes to help shift and raise consciousness. So the other issue, though, again, in the dysfunctional expression, is that blueprint designers may struggle with being able to express themselves effectively in other ways. They can express themselves so well through art, but maybe not as much through language or through social conventions or things like that, which is why they can be seen as eccentric. But I think that it's a beautiful quality to have because it makes them different and unique, and they see the world in a different and unique way, and then they can create from that. So the dysfunctional aspects can be partly that, but also they can become distracted or reclusive, really obsessive with a singular focus on their art, which then disconnects them from life. So it's important for designers to, yes, express through art, but also to integrate into society in a way that creates balance in their life. Next up, we have technicians. So this is the subset that I've worked the most with, and this is pretty interesting because I remember back when I hadn't started the training for soul realignment yet, and I was primarily just serving clients in terms of Reiki. And I had a client last year who I was in his soul blueprint, and I was feeling around, and I was connecting with his higher self, and I was getting this download, and I was being shown all of these past lives with all of these different things and so much karma, and I was just really overwhelmed. It was like, in a movie where things are just flashing really quickly. It was like that. I was seeing all these different time periods and people and expressions and different experiences all flashing before my eyes. And then they kind of zoomed me out, and they showed me the soul itself, like the higher self, came forward, and I could feel that this individual was an engineer of some kind. And that was what came through, the word engineer and the word archon. And I had to Google what archon meant, because I was like, what? I've never really used that before. And this is pretty much what technicians are. I mean, that's what blueprinters are in general, but specifically the technicians. So they are the engineer subset of the blueprinter soul group. They are the practical applicators. And this makes them the most karmically tied to humanity, because they're the ones who really engineered the system. They're the ones who engineered the biological body. All of these different aspects that really connect them to the experiment. So they're the ones who were really in there with their hands in it. So they tend to incarnate and then want to clear karma at that really in-depth subjective level. So they will incarnate into the human body and into lives in particular that can be challenging. This and another subgroup do that as well. And this is to help to assist humanity on that level. So they're very rational, they're very intellectual, they love to study, but they don't necessarily understand emotions. Because they're so functionally oriented, they are more inclined to that logical, rational mind. So sometimes they can even rationalize their emotional experiences or think that they're very connected to their emotional body and those experiences, but actually that's just a part of the rationalization. And how would they know any different? Because they only have one basis of understanding, and that's their subjective experience. So it's very interesting working with these starseeds or this soul type, because they tend to think that they're very emotionally evolved and mature, and some of them very well may be, but they don't understand their emotions to the same degree as very emotionally subjective souls, such as Hadarians, which we'll talk about at some point as well, can be. But their strengths really lie in innovation, in the practical fields, right? Because that's where logic and rational areas of study really shine. So they may not question their own rationalization, but they can functionally understand and reverse engineer their emotions through a very practical means. So if by looking at the results that they're getting based on the emotions or the actions that they're taking based on those emotions, they can reverse engineer what the emotion is, what it's coming from, what the trigger was, all of these different things. I work with a couple of different blueprint technician starseeds, and this is primarily what we focus on when we're working with Reiki or spiritual counseling. The dysfunctional aspect of this subset is arrogance, or it can be anyway, arrogance, over-rationalization, emotional suppression, and rejection of things that don't make sense, which can result in closed-mindedness or a lack of emotional self-awareness. So all of those things kind of tie in together with that rationalization of the emotions, over-intellectualizing things and being too much in the head or in the mind, rather than being in the physical experience, in the body, in the emotions, or in the heart. So that's something that blueprint technicians can work with. And I've also seen interesting combinations with soul types, because the soul group of origin is only one aspect of the soul. The real core of the soul is the soul type. And that's not what we're talking about here today. I might make a series on that, but it's interesting when you get combinations that are contradictory or mitigating, and how the individual within the incarnation has to kind of work with those energies. So next up, we're going to talk about blueprint deliverers. So these are even more active and on the ground than the technicians. These were the first to incarnate, and they are here to promote consciousness expansion in a very hands-on way. So they're very boots on the ground, rooted, anchored, and they tend to be very inclusive, wanting everyone to be connected and successful, and in a very practical way. So they tend to incarnate into roles where they work in like nonprofit groups, organizations, or grassroots movements, that kind of thing. So they're very foot on the ground, bootstraps kind of people. Their main goal is to create more equality, and there does tend to be a focus on human rights as well. The dysfunctional aspect of this soul group can be over-helping. They may find that they don't understand that some people just don't want to expand their consciousness, which can relate or result in frustration and resentment. So, it takes a lot of responsibility to raise your consciousness because you're giving yourself a lot of power. And there are some people who simply do not want that. And I think we all have to kind of come to terms with that if sleepers want to sleep, we need to let a sleeping dog lie. And it's hard for blueprint deliverers to do that because part of their job is to awaken and expand consciousness. And so they can take it as almost like a personal failure if they lead a horse to water and they can't make it drink. You know what I mean? But part of understanding that we are all divine beings and that we get to choose when and how we awaken is part of respecting other people's choices and those choices that they make within the incarnation. So if this soul group, the deliverers, get really frustrated and resentful that they're not able to create consciousness expansion in the way that they're hoping to, this can lead to disillusionment or disempowerment of themselves or others. Now, this is usually inadvertent, but it can be a result of trying to overhelp or seeing other people as helpless, right? That's not helpful for the other person, seeing them as like a helpless sheep or something like that. It's not true in and of itself. Sleeping individuals are still highly awakened, empowered expressions of the Creator. They're choosing to be asleep for a reason. That's part of their soul journey. And deliverers have to kind of work at understanding that if they find themselves in that dysfunctional expression. So next up, we have the blueprint changers. Changers are here to rewrite and fix the things that get out of balance. So they're like the coders. They go into the computer system of the biological human consciousness and they look for viruses or bugs in the system, and they are there to fix it. So they're like tech support. You call them when something's going wrong. They help you kind of figure out what it is, get to the root of it, and change it. So they're here to fix things that get out of balance. They incarnate into different lives to try and change the aspects of human consciousness that don't work. Now, the problem with this is that they can incarnate into incarnations where they are in very violent or abusive situations, very negative and dysfunctional expressions of humanity. The reason why is because they're trying to fix it. So in some degree, this is sort of similar to Andromedans. But Andromedans, it's because it was like a mission statement, whereas with the blueprint changers, it's just part of their role within the blueprint group and within the human consciousness experiment. So it's important for them to create some level of detachment from their work and to understand that it's important for them, yes, to fix some of these issues, but not by completely immersing themselves into these really traumatic experiences or incarnations, because what ends up happening is that they can get sucked under instead of being able to rise above and then raise the consciousness. So it becomes counterintuitive or counterproductive when they end up falling prey to the violence, to the abuse, to the trauma, and then they're not able to perform the fixing that they came to do. So for blueprint changers, it's important to take a step back and to focus on creating and fixing from the level of internalized subjective experience rather than incarnating into these lives and situations that kind of where they're trying to fix things externally, so to speak. So that is it for the Blueprinter episode. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. Check out those links. And if you'd like to book a Soul Realignment Akashic Record reading with me, you can find all of the information and pricing and how to contact me in the description box below this video. Just email me at services.tokittyanbeyond@gmail.com and we can get a remote Akashic reading or a live Skype presentation of your Akashic reading set up for you. Much love, guys. Thanks so much. See you next time. Bye.